Ska vi se.
Er det viktig? Deler skjerm, er det viktigere? Ja. Jeg finner med til kontrollen. Okay, welcome everyone to this symposium. I'll try share again. I wasn't able to unmute myself after. We'll just start having some technical issues here, but that's okay. So then, welcome everyone to this symposium called Enhancing Critical Thinking in Primary Education Through Children's Literature and News. My name is Kirsti Marie Jekstad, and I'm the chair of this session. The symposium is founded in the KriT project at OsloMet, and I will start by giving a brief overview of the project before I will introduce the presenters. KriT is an interdisciplinary project aiming at developing didactical models for critical thinking in primary education using children's literature and news. The project is financed by the Research Council of Norway and owned by the City of Oslo. The project is managed from OsloMet, and I'm the project leader. To give an overview of the participants of the project, the main contributors include teachers and educational leaders in the City of Oslo, and researchers from OsloMet representing 4 different school subjects, as well as pedagogy. We also have 3 partners, which are the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation through Supernytt, their news broadcast for children, the National Centre of Multicultural Education, and the Norwegian Institute for Children's Books. The project started approximately 1 year ago and will last for 3 years. In the project, we employ design-based research where we aim to develop didactical models for critical thinking through 3 cycles. Each cycle consists of 5 main activities, and as you can see on the figure, which might be a little bit small, we develop didactical principle in main activity 1. We have seminars where we develop teaching resources together with the teachers, and then the teachers implement these resources with their pupils while data is collected. And the data is collected through video recordings, pupils' texts, video-stimulated interviews with teachers, and logs from teachers and researchers. And then in the main activity 4, we analyze the data. And based on these analyses, the didactical principles are refined in the next cycle. Throughout the DBR cycle, results from the project is disseminated to both schools and to higher education. In the data collection, we aim to follow 3 schools, and we include pupils from grades 1, 3, 4, and 6. This means that during the data collection period of 1.5 years, we will follow pupils from all grades of primary school. The teaching resources we develop are, as mentioned earlier, based on news or children's literature, and they include cross-curricular approaches. More insight into this and other aspects of the project will be given through the papers we will present today. So, altogether, we will present 4 papers from the project. First, Eric will present the theoretical foundations of our project. Before, we will have 3 empirical contributions and a final discussion. We have a tight schedule and will therefore have a joint session for questions towards the end of the symposium. So please, Eric, the Zoom room is yours for the presentation. For the presentation, developing a theoretical framework and empirical indicators for developing and researching critical thinking in science, social sciences, and language didactics.
Thank you very much, Kirsti.
So I will say a little bit about the theoretical framework and the empirical indicators that we are developing in the KriT project. So firstly, I have to say that this is a work in progress. We are still in an early stage. As Kirsti said, critical thinking is the starting point of our research project. And on a very basic level, critical thinking is fairly easy to define. However, when we go into more depth, when we look at what critical thinking means in practice, and not least how teaching is connected to critical thinking, it starts to become much more complicated. So, when we look at the scholarly debate, we see many different approaches to critical thinking. There are many nuances here, of course, but if we simplify a great deal, we can say that the main difference is between an approach that is based on philosophy and science, often called the critical thinking school, and one based in sociology and curriculum studies, which is often referred to as critical pedagogy. To those working within the critical thinking school, the image of the classroom is often seen as a community of inquiry, and the degree of critical thinking can be seen in the ability of the individuals and the community to apply thinking skills. And the ideal of the teacher is often seen as a cognitive coach or a trainer that should help the students improve their thinking skills. Another strand of critical thought connected to school is critical pedagogy. To those working within critical pedagogy, approaching critical thinking as mainly a question of skills is not sufficient. Because they argue this tends to make teaching blind to structural differences of power relations and connections that cannot be grasped only through argument analysis or logics. So in this picture, the ideal of the teacher is to help students expose these relations to the students. For example, through carefully selecting teaching materials that expose them to these relations of power and connections in society. When we look at this from a didactic perspective, we see a tendency for critical thinking school to promote what we can say is a formal educational theory. The teacher often tends to disappear. Gert Bista has called this a move from the teacher as a sage on the stage to a guide on the side and perhaps a peer at the rear. In critical pedagogy, there is a tendency to promote what we can call a material educational theory, focused on more on the contents, and the teacher has a different role. But also here we see in the literature a risk of the teacher becoming what we can say dogmatic, and we can ask what room is there for independent thinking on the part of the students if the role of the teacher is to expose certain power relations to the students. According to Wolfgang Klafki, who was a leading scholar within the Bildung-centered didactic traditions in the latter part of the 20th century, he analyzed the formal and material theories of Bildung, or formation, which we connect to critical thinking. And he argued that they both contain elements of truth. But what we need, Klafki argues, is a synthesis of both. They are not sufficient in and of themselves. And what Klafki argues that we need to aim for is what he calls a double unlocking. Teaching needs to help open the world to the student, while at the same time opening the student to the world. So if we understand Bildung, formation, in this way, we can see that it is about understanding important aspects of a world that already exists, but crucially doing so in a way that opens for the possibility of the person to think critically take a stand, and being able to act in relation to the existing. So we are taking this as a starting point, connecting Bildung with the concept of critical thinking. And in the figure you can see here, we have tried to conceptualize this in a model where we try to show exactly this point, that didactic understanding of critical thinking need to be attentive to both the material, the content or subject knowledge, as well as the formal aspects or skills. So this is the model underlying our work when we try to conceptualize critical thinking in the classroom. Then we move on to the development of empirical indicator. The question here is, what should we look for? What should we look into when we aim to develop didactics for critical thinking? As you can see, we are using the classical didactic triangle, which shows the three necessary components in a pedagogical situation that will always be present. That is the teacher, the student, and the content. We think that this model can be useful for us, as we can then focus on different types of relationships in the pedagogical situation. We can look firstly at the relationship between student and content. What types of content can be suitable for developing critical thinking? So that's the first axis here. And then secondly, we can look into the connection between teacher and content, asking the question, how can we plan for critical thinking? What kind of models for planning teaching can we use, lesson planning? And thirdly, if you look at the dotted line here, how does the teacher represent the content and interact with the students? So bringing in both number 1 and 2, when we move to number 3 here, the dotted line, we look at how the teacher represents the content and interact with the students, thus mediating between student and content in the actual teaching processes. And how can this be done in a way that promotes critical thinking? So as you can see, we are raising many questions. We don't have many answers yet, but what we hope to achieve is to be able to develop some indicators and didactic principles based on the empirical material we collect. So in this model you can see here, we have in the yellow area, we show the 3 categories that within which we hope to develop indicators and principle. So content, planning, and teaching. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. I'll just have a little technical thing here. There. Okay. Okay, new share. We are now ready for our next presenter. I just have to share again. Oh. Is it shared? I have some technical issues here because I'm going to play a video and I needed to include. I'm not sure why it's. I think we might have to skip that presentation and go for the next one and then change the order. Is that okay, Cecil? Yeah, because the next one is a video and I have some technical issues. It won't share with video sound, so I think I'll take that share that in another way. So then we will come back to the third paper 2, and we'll have paper 3 first. Oops. So our next presentation is about literacy conversations as a possibility to foster critical thinking, and we will hear from Hilde and Sissel. So here you are, the Zoom room is yours.
Right, so yes. Thank you. On behalf of our interdisciplinary research group, me and my colleague Hilde Turnby will present how we worked with John Claessen's picture book, We Found a Hat, in 4th grade to foster critical thinking. So the book relates a story about 2 turtles who find one hat, and what should they do with it? We developed a lesson plan with teachers in 4th grade. And the aim of our project is to investigate how a picture book functions as a fictional framework for literary conversations and critical thinking. And our research question is as follows. Where and how do traces of critical thinking appear in the different phases of the literary conversation? And Hilde will tell you more about the different phases.
Yes, in this paper we are looking at what happens in the classroom. We are observing and filming 4th graders when they read We Found a Hat. And we are using Langer's 4 steps of envisionment in our analytical work with what's happening in the classroom. Langer talks about this, that before you read something, it could be anything really, you are outside of the text. And she calls this being out and stepping into an envisionment. So in this presentation today, we're going to look at what the teachers did in this phase of the work with this picture book in the classroom. And then we're going to talk a bit about what's happening as they move through the text. And we would have liked to talk more about what's happening afterwards, but that's not part of this session today due to the limitation of time, I believe. And maybe also where we are in our process. Okay, I think you can click for me. So to help students engage with the text and to help them enter the text, to create envisionment before they start reading, the teachers decided on, and together with us, we decided on sort of an artifact, a bowl of 5 lollipops, sitting in the classroom so that when the kids came back from recess, they saw this. And started asking questions. What's this about? So you can hear them thinking about this artifact before we start reading. So this is sort of, it corresponds to what Langer talks about as entering or before entering the text. And teachers asked the question, who deserves a lollipop? Okay. Who deserves a lollipop? And the pupils responded, and they came up with a variety of reasons why they should have a lollipop. For example, that they are training much or they are collaborating, but also some responses said, I don't deserve a lollipop because I do not pay attention in class, or because I do get sweets at home. Yes. I think we can click me further. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Now that's here.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, this one student, he upends the balance of power in the classroom by stating, there's no point in discussing because none of us are going to get it. So the teacher responds, okay, why not? And Sebastian continues, if we had been 25 students, it means that there are 20 who don't get anything. And then there's another student shouting out, it's going to be unfair. And the teacher says, but is it unfair then if some gets and some don't get? And Sebastian continues, yes, because everyone's done something that has disturbed. Everyone's done something bad. But even if you've done several things that are kind, everyone's done something bad. So it means that no one really deserves it. Either everyone deserves it or no one deserves it. So what we see here is that there are two forms of critical thinking in this group. We have the majority who accepts the teacher's project and think critically on the ethical dilemma that they've been presented with. And then we have this one student who takes a meta perspective and he questions the premises of the task and implicitly then the teacher's authority. And this is at the core of critical pedagogy, where this student contextualizes the task to question the power relationships. And so we see further in stance 1 that envisionment is developed by using pupils' knowledge and experience. Sebastian here, he drew on his knowledge of his real-life experiences. For reasons of time, as Hilde said, we will not go into depth talking about how the teacher facilitated critical thinking, but we can mention that the teacher gives students possibilities to think, speak, listen, and gather ideas. She gave opportunities to activate prior knowledge or experiences of sharing when the resources are scarce. This is a well-known situation for the pupils. And she led the students into the core dilemma and the theme of the book in this way. So the ethical dilemma and the teacher's scaffolding give rise to the students' responses and critical thinking. Moving on to stance 2, this is where we started reading the book, and then there were several reading stops along the way to allow the students to reflect on the themes. And the first one is very early in the book, where we see that there are 2 turtles, but only 1 hat, so what to do? The students were asked what they thought about this, what they thought would happen, and who should get the hat.
And what is interesting